I didn't want a bird. I really, really didn't want a bird. Every year, every summer, because of having a barn and all these birds, I have bird drama. Baby birds falling out of nests, all kinds of stuff. Happens every year. It's early, there are no babies yet, and yet I've already had a little bit of a bird story. Fortunately, with a happy ending. As you know, I have two barns back there. One is the horses, tack room, and then I have another barn that has the heated tack room with all, and then next to it, connected with it, is the big hay room. And we had those 2 days in a row that were 93 degrees. Crazy. It was just crazy. And early in the day of one of the first 93-degree day, I had gone in and taken out several bales of hay to bring into the horse barn. I do that just so it's easier to feed them. I put it into the feed stall that I have in there. And then I close the door, and I keep it closed because the dogs pee on the hay, and the horses, as you can probably imagine, they don't appreciate that. So I always keep it closed. And then the next day, it was late afternoon, early evening, and I was working on something. Max had ruined the float again. I had set up the water float now that's not freezing anymore with a small bucket with a float, automatic float in there, and he likes to play in the water, which I really can't really blame him because it was 93 degrees and they still have, winter coat on them. So I think he was just trying to cool himself off, and he broke the thing. So I had bought a new one, and you have to put it together a little bit. So I thought, well, I'm going to sit on this. The hay barn has a fairly steep step to walk up into it, so it's a nice place to sit. So I opened the door, I turned around, and I sat down, facing out. Immediately out flutters this female house sparrow right onto the ground in front of me, and she just stood there. And my dogs are there with me, and I'm sitting right there, and I realized she'd been locked in there for probably 30 hours. And I was looking at her, and her eyes were barely open, and she wasn't flying off, and she wasn't hopping the way they normally do. She's just walking on the ground, and I got up, and she tried to herd her further away from my dogs, and she just walked slowly over to where the grass was, immediately started to grab at little bits of clover. She was starving, and I'm sure so thirsty from being in that heat all that time, no food, no water. And I went and I got the lid of a 5-gallon bucket, plastic bucket, the lids are shallow, and I filled it with water. And I went over to her, and I'm bending down and holding in. I splash a little water as I'm on purpose as I'm setting it down. She comes running over to me immediately and grabs the other end of it. I'm holding one side as I'm down on the ground. She's got the other with one foot and just drinking water. She was so thirsty. It was amazing. It was, and then she kept eating grass, and then eventually she got her strength back and she flew off. If I hadn't opened that door and just decided to sit there, that bird would have been gone because there's no way she would have survived another day in there. Yeah, so the bird stories for 2023 have started. We'll see what happens later as the year goes on. You have no idea. It is another glorious day. Got Max out riding in this beautiful area. And I'm seeing a single swan out there. Hey, Maxie. What do you think? It's pretty fresh. Couldn't film until now. We've gone a bit of a ways here until I felt it was safe to pull out my phone. First time riding here this year. Everything's blooming. Dogwoods, crab apples. Absolutely gorgeous. 67 degrees, I think. It's a good boy. Really good boy. Baby animal drama has already kicked off. First with the saving of a baby squirrel that was about 4 to 6 weeks old, a female baby squirrel that obviously the mother had been killed because it came out of the woods up to a lady walking her dog in the place where I just finished my trail ride, and as soon as I got off my horse, she kept trying to stay away from it, to keep the dog away from it. I was coming right out of, I had ridden Eddie here yesterday. Gorgeous day, just like today. It's what you call a perfect day. 67 degrees, dry, sunny. Good boy. Spring. No, you've all seen that view. So pretty. We did the whole ride. I was coming to walk out this gate, and I see up ahead of me a lady walking her dog out. People walk here with their dogs all the time. And she's looking on the ground, and I look where she's looking, and there's a squirrel, a baby squirrel, crawling over to her, crying. And she's trying to keep her dog away, and she keeps moving away from it, and it keeps running to her. And then I got off Eddie and walked up to it and started running to me and crying. And I knew right then and there that this was a baby that had been abandoned. Either its mother was killed or whatever, but I was like, great. And the woman couldn't take it, obviously, so fortunately I did have something in my truck. I said, here, you watch him, and I ran and I put Eddie all sweaty into the horse trailer and put it into the bag and drove home. Oh, I couldn't believe it. And I spent the next couple hours trying to figure out what to do with it, calling around and waiting. And I had it for about 2 hours because that's about how long it took me to figure out where a rescue was that would take it. And to my surprise, there's one near me about 15 minutes away. But it took a while to hear back, and I was fully thinking I was going to need to babysit and feed this thing. And that was going to be keeping me up all night worrying. I gave it some water because it was dehydrated with a little tiny eyedropper, which it wanted. And then I heated up a sock with rice. I found all this information on the internet. And it crawled right on top of the sock and hugged it and was trying to nurse on it. The poor thing was so hungry. And I realized by reading the internet, you're supposed to feed it a certain type of powdered puppy food. When I found a pet store near me that was open late because it's already 6:30 at night by this time, and I was on my way in the car with the little squirrel in the box to buy this stuff because the place hadn't gotten back to me yet, and I'm thinking I gotta feed this thing. Well, fortunately, on my way to that store, they called me and asked me if I could possibly bring it. I said absolutely. The shelter that I found is called Animal Nation, and they take all kinds of animals, unbelievable, everything from horses to every kind of bird, pigs, sheep, of course, wildlife. Yeah, it's incredible. Really, really devoted people that work there. I was very impressed. Hey, bud. This is amazing. What are you doing? Wow. Oh, what's that?
Those are Chinese golden pheasants. So they were dumped in a 5-gallon bucket in Staten Island. We have a hen on that.
Are they illegal? Are they legal to have?
Yeah. You can buy them on eBay. Yeah.
Unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
So I drove it over there, and then that's what they told me. It was like I had done the right thing because it was abandoned. And it was about, as I said, a 5 to 6 week old female, they said. And the next day, someone else riding a horse, because I told them you have to put down in the form you fill out where you found it. And they texted me and asked again where I'd found it, and I reiterated, and they said, we found another one. Someone else found it in the same area. So obviously another one came out of the nest looking for food and help. So that was nice. They got to put them back together. And she sent me a photo of the first day of the baby that I brought already drinking from the eyedropper. I was so relieved. But that's not the end of my baby drama. So last night, to the late night horse feed, I go down to the barn, and it gets cold. It's been getting really cold at night, cold still in the morning. I go down to the barn, and I'm walking in the aisle, gonna go in right in the doorway, going into the feed stall where I keep the hay and grain inside the horse barn. What do I find on the baby? On the floor, but a baby starling. Half naked with some feathers starting. And it was just cold and slowly freezing to death and slowly dying there on the floor. And of course I picked it up and brought it in the house and warmed it up. And I had to rehydrate it because you can learn how to test if they're dehydrated. Just pull the skin up on the back of the neck, and if it doesn't go back into place quickly, that's a sign. So I rehydrated because you have to do that before you can feed them. And we put a little salt in water, a cup of water, a little pinch of salt, and that's what to use. And put it in a box overnight, setting the box on a heating pad. And this morning it was wide awake and hungry, and so I had mixed up the dog food, egg, and apple sauce that you're supposed to feed them with, and just eating like gangbusters. I have some video of that. The thing is, when I went down to the barn this morning, right above it is where usually the house sparrows are nesting, but I think a starling has taken over what used to be always a sparrow nest. And I can hear the same sound of chirping, so I'm about to go down to the barn now, and I'm going to look with a hand mirror, which I have right here. I'm going to look to see if it's the same size of baby, because that's the only place it could have fallen. These things can't fly at all, so it was right below that. So I'm pretty sure if there's two nests right next to each other, I have to look, because there's several up there, I have to look. But my hope is that I can put it back, because it doesn't seem at all injured. It's very hungry now, eagerly wants the food. And I don't want a bird. I don't want a pet bird. Even though I've seen a video of a starling, I have no idea that starlings can mimic sounds like crazy. There's this one I can't remember his name, but I'll see if I can find a little clip of that and show you. But
Starling. European starling. Central Park, New York City. Central Park, New York City.
I don't want birds. So fingers crossed I can get this one back in the nest. And then I have a plan for what to do if more of them fall out, because I think the nest isn't big enough. It's a stupid place for this starling to have put a nest. Because there's several starling nests down there, and they usually go in between the crack in the doorway behind the walls. And anyway, wish me luck. All right, well, I put it back up.
There were 2 in the nest, now there's 3, so hopefully the parents are around and they're not been abandoned and they will continue to feed them and they will not come out of this nest again. I hope not. I'll keep an eye on it. Well, I really hoped that I was just going to be putting this nice short little cap on this video and that was going to be the end of the story. Unfortunately, it's not the end of the story. Well, I went down to the barn yesterday and found one of the babies on the floor of the stall. I mean, in the aisleway, right under the nest again. So I crawled back up and I looked in there in the nest, and the hole that I had patched, the straw had all been moved out again, and there was no sign of the other 2. Nest was empty. I looked everywhere in my barn with a fine-tooth comb, searching for the other 2. You know, they can crawl at this stage, you know, but they can't get that far. I looked everywhere, inside and out, and no sign of them. So sad. So I took the single one back into the house. I don't know which of the 3 this is. I don't think it's the original one that I was feeding because it's a fussy eater compared to that one. Yeah. So this will be part 1. I don't know what's gonna happen, folks. 99.9% of the time when you find baby birds, it doesn't end well, but I have raised and released a starling once before. It was older than this one when I found it, but you know, we'll see how it goes. I'll just do my best and let you know. All right. The animal saga continues.